Welcome everyone to Parshat Shavua, Yerushalayim Ir HaKodesh, sponsored by Be There Israel and Or Chadash. Baruch Hashem, I'm getting emails, truthfully, from people all over the world who are watching. So if you're watching live, or if you're watching archived starting Tuesday night, please tell your friends, please share the link, and let's make this a big, what is it called? World Village. What is it called? Global Village. Let's make this Parshat Shavua class a virtual global village. So we're going to start with some music tonight. For those who are watching, you should just know that if you're living in Israel, when we finish the class, we usually play some music. So we decided to put some music first. We'll play a couple songs, and then we'll go into the class. Okay, so let's play. For those who don't know, that's Reb Shlomo's Eshet Chayil. Let's play something a little bit upbeat. Good? Okay, tonight we're learning Parshat Ve'era. There's some, I can say this about every Parsha, of course, but there's some very, very deep matters here. Very, very deep matters. The Parsha starts with a pasuk that many people just kind of pass over, feeling It doesn't say much. It says, the first verse in the parsha says, Vayidaber Elokim el Moshe, Vayomer Elav Ani Hashem. So it says, and God, the name Elokim, says to Moshe, and he says to him, I am God. So, like, okay, what's the next verse? But this is one of the most important verses in the Torah. Because what is it telling us? It's telling us that Elokim is Yud Kei Vav Kei. And Yud Kei Vav Kei is Elokim. If you look at it carefully, Elokim speaks to him and doesn't say, I am Elokim. It says, I am Yud Kei Vav Kei. So let's now try to understand the context of this statement. So we have to go back to the end of last week's parsha. The end of last week's parsha is Moshe goes into Paro, and in God's name says, let my people go. And Paro says, I don't know who your God is. I'm not listening to him. Forget it. And you want to make trouble. So now you have to make bricks and you have to gather the straw yourself. So Moshe comes out from talking to Paro, and he's confronted by Datan and Aviram, his old nemesis. And they say, God should judge you. Like, you said you were coming to save us. Like, things are much worse now. God should judge you. And Moshe, if you read the last few verses, so it says, Moshe, one second. So it says, Vayeshav Moshe el Hashem, V'yomar, and Moshe returned to God and said, Hashem, lama herota la'am hazeh? Why have you done evil to this people? V'lama zeh shalachtani, and why did you send me? Ume'az bati el paro ledaber b'shemecha hera la'am hazeh? Because from the time that I came to speak to Paro in your name, evil has been done to the people. V'hatzel lo hitzaltu et amecha, and you didn't save your people. V'yomer Hashem el Moshe. So God says to Moshe, Ata tireh asher aseh leParo. Now you'll see what I'll do to Paro. Ki biyad chazaka yishalchem, because with a strong hand he will send you out. U'biyad chazaka yirugashem me'artzot, and with a strong hand he will expel you from his land. So this is actually an amazing thing. It seems that Moshe is showing very little faith in Hashem, because it's true, Paro made it worse, but at the burning bush, God already told him, Paro is not going to listen to you, and I'm going to bring on wonders and miracles, and then he will. So, in other words, the scenario that's unfolding here is not a surprise to Moshe. He's already been told it's not going to be chick-chock. It's not going to be 1, 2, 3. It's going to be a process, and in that process, that is how the redemption will happen. So we wonder, what is his questions here? He has two questions. One is, why have you done evil to the people? And two, why did you send me? But in relation to what I just said, it's like hard to understand that Moshe doesn't understand what's happening here. So the parsha ends, and then it begins with this verse. And Elohim says to Moshe, and he says to him, I am Hashem. And then it says, and I appeared to Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov in the name Kel Shakai. Ushmi Yudke Vavke Lo Nadati Lehem. And the name of Yudke Vavke I did not make known to them. So we're going to spend a good part of the class trying to understand what is really happening here. If we just leave it at translating the words, we get a very, very superficial and actually a shallow understanding of what's happening here. We have to really delve in here. So I'll mention a Torah from the Ishbitzer. The Ishbitzer says a Torah like this. If you look at the verse again, so there's not only there are two names of God, Elohim saying, I am Hashem, and we will discuss what does that mean. And why did I say that this is like one of the most important verses in the Torah, revealing that Elohim is Yud-Kei Vav-Kei. But it begins with Vayedaber Elohim, and then it says Vayomer Elav. It says God speaks, the word diber, but then it says another word for speaking, Vayomer Elav. So Rashi has explained in other places in the Torah that the language of Dibur is a stronger, more, let's say, cutting way of speech. Like cut right to the heart of the matter. Vayomer is considered a softer type of language of speaking. So the Rabbi from Ishbitz says, why do they have both in the same sense? What are we being told here? So he says that this is a continuation of the answer that God is giving Moshe. Moshe asked two questions. Why have you done evil to this people, and why did you send me? And God said, now you'll see what I'll do to Paro. And this is actually a total continuation. And so the language of Dibur is rebuke. Like God is, in a sense, rebuking Moshe for questioning him. But then there's a softer language, Vayomer. So the Ishbitzer Rebbe says that when God saw Moshe recoil from the strong language, God softened the language because he didn't want to totally discourage him. That's what the Ishbitzer says, but he doesn't actually fill in, well, why didn't he want to discourage him? The Ishbitzer doesn't say. He just says it's a short Torah, and he says that God steps back and softens his language. So, for those of you who have Orchard of Delights, this is one of the Torahs in the book where I try to fill in why didn't he want to totally rebuke him? And the answer, I'm going to expand greatly on from what is written in the book. In the book I write, first of all, how are you?
Wonderful, how are you doing?
Good to see you. That God knows the future. And he is grooming Moshe to be a leader. If we start and we follow the development of Moshe, especially at the burning bush, Moshe seems to be full of, I'm talking about just on a simple shot, it's much deeper than this, but on a simple shot, he seems very reluctant, unsure of himself, what we would call low self-esteem, not sure he can pull it off, trying to avoid the responsibility. And yet, God is very clear, you're the one I want to lead Bnei Yisrael. And really, if you look from this point to the end of the Torah, we actually see the development of Moshe into a leader. Not just a leader, perhaps the greatest leader the Jewish people have ever had. And as we've discussed many times, that the soul of Moshe will reappear in the soul of Mashiach. So when we say like the greatest leader, like we really mean it. So God does not want to discourage a particular characteristic of Moshe, and that is his compassion. Because God recognizes, and we're going to expand on this greatly tonight, God, according to the Midrash, one of the Midrashim of why God picked Moshe. And I think, Moshe, you said it last week, that the Midrash is that one of the sheep ran away, and he goes looking for the sheep, and he finally finds the sheep, and the sheep is like licking a little water from like a crevice in a rock. And Moshe says, now I know why you ran away, because I didn't give you enough water. You were thirsty. And so he put the sheep up on his shoulders and carried him all the way back. On the way back, he comes to the burning bush. And the Midrash says, when God saw not only the compassion that Moshe himself went to look for the sheep, he didn't send one of the other shepherds, and just the way he treated the sheep, he said, this is the shepherd I want for my sheep. And so we see that the characteristic, the midah that God sees in Moshe is compassion. If we go back even further, it's very, very clear that Moshe sees an Egyptian beating a Jew, and he puts everything on the line. Prince of Egypt puts everything on the line, and he kills the Egyptian, and because of that he has to run away, and he had to give it all up. All of the glory, the wealth, the privilege. But what motivated him? Compassion. In the future, we will see that Moshe, on a number of occasions, in a sense, stands up to God, which is exactly what God wanted, and pleads for the people. To the point, after the golden calf, where he says, if you don't forgive the people, then wipe me out of your book. Like the ultimate of compassion. So what I explained is that this is what the Ishbitzer meant when he says God, when he saw that Moshe was recoiling, because why did he say, God, since I came to speak in your name, it's worse. What was motivating him? Again, compassion. So God sees that, so he softens his language. Why? Because he sees that this is Moshe's greatest midah. He doesn't want to discourage him. You would think that after what Moshe said to him, like, God, why have you done evil to the people? Like, that's a very strong accusation. And why did you send me? So you would think that God would like, but he begins strong, but then he backs up because he wants nothing more from Moshe than to actually defend the people and to have compassion on the people. He didn't want to discourage him. So this is a lead-in into understanding a deeper aspect of Moshe. For those who followed the class last week, we began by trying to understand like who Moshe was and the nature of his soul. Because we said that from this point on to the end of the Torah, Moshe is the main character in the Torah. There's all kinds of side characters, but he is the central figure from now until next Simchas Torah, to the end of the Torah. He's the main person here. So we only touched the surface last week. So here we're going to touch on two qualities of Moshe. We started with compassion, and we're going to add another one of selflessness. And we're going to try to understand how this relates to the essence of who Moshe is. Okay, so I'm not sure if people can see this, but this is a book that I had the great privilege to write with Rav Ginsburg. It's called Awakening the Spark Within: 5 Dynamics of Leadership That Can Change the World. And in it, Rav Ginsburg does like a survey of all kinds of Jewish sources, especially Chassidut, Kabbalah, but all the normative sources, and presents 5 dynamics of leadership. One of them is, actually the third in the book, is the ability to inspire, that a leader has to be able to inspire. To inspire, one has to be inspired themselves. And the deep connection between compassion and inspiration. Now, this is a connection we wouldn't ordinarily think of. We wouldn't ordinarily think of what elicits inspiration. So the answer is compassion. So there's a verse in Yeshayahu, Isaiah 49:10, that says, "For he who shows compassion will lead them." Yeshayahu gives us all the cardinal paradigms of Mashiach. Everything that really that we know and envision about Mashiach really comes from Isaiah and then carried on by all the other prophets. So in that, it's a very, very important verse where he says that the one who shows compassion, he will lead them. So, meaning that of all of the personality qualities that contribute to leadership, compassion is like, in this verse, is like the top. And we see this in Moshe. It's very, very important. These different things that I mentioned: killing the Egyptian, speaking to God right after he went into Paro, defending the people after the golden calf, defending the people after the spies, defending after the people when they complained over and over and over again. This is all coming from Moshe's compassion. So it's not like one of the words on the list of qualities of a leader, of a Jewish leader. It's like way up there. Way up there. But the interesting thing is that is the connection between compassion and inspiration. It's explained that when we have compassion in a Jewish sense, compassion elicits the inspiration to act. In other words, compassion without the determination to do something about it, from a Jewish point of view, it is compassion, but it's a very, very low level of compassion. It's like for example, I don't know, we're watching the news on TV and there's, God forbid, Chas v'shalom, there's a hurricane, there's a tornado, there's a terrorist attack, there's a train wreck, whatever it is, and we're watching, and it's like, oy, all these people killed, and we do feel something. We do feel something, and then we change the channel, right? What else is on? Right, that kind of thing. We do feel something for a moment, and it's real, but it doesn't elicit anything, really. From a Jewish point of view, compassion must lead to action. And to act, we need to be inspired to act. Because there's so many choices we can make in life. There's so much to do. And there's only so many places we can put our energy. So when we decide where to put our energy, usually we have to be somewhat inspired in order to do that. So this is the connection between compassion and inspiration. And so Rav Ginsburg explains the more compassion that we have, it elicits inspiration. And this is where inspiration comes from. See, we're used to thinking of inspiration of seeing a beautiful sunset. It's true, we are inspired. Going to a museum and seeing a beautiful picture, going to a concert and hearing beautiful music, and we're inspired. But if you really, really think about it, that inspiration usually lasts for a couple minutes, an hour, and then we get on with our lives. Like nothing actually happens from it. We're talking about compassion that directs our life. It's not like like fun or an experience that turns us on. Now there are people who, go to a concert at the age of 10, and they are inspired to play an instrument, and then they do it. So that means that is like true inspiration. That's true inspiration. But here we're talking about inspiration in the role of leadership. What motivates a Jewish leader? And so like if you had to get it down to one word, compassion. So Rav Ginsburg explains further. He says there's 3 levels of compassion that we can have. And this is, I was really meditating on this today. It's a very, very deep idea if you can remember this. So he says there's one level of having compassion on any soul that is in a body, for the simple reason of how difficult it is for a soul to come down to this world and be in a body and have to deal with the Yetzer HaTov, the Yetzer Hara, the animal soul and the divine soul, and all of the existential parameters that we find ourselves in 24/7. He said that's enough to have tremendous compassion on everyone. In a sense, we're like all in the same boat, because who has an easy time? I think if you think about it, maybe you can come up with someone, but I personally don't know a single individual who doesn't have a major challenge in their life. Whether it's health, relationships, money, business, inner drives, profession, parents, children, spouse, siblings, whatever it is. Who doesn't have like a major challenge in their life. So he said that that's enough to have compassion on everyone, because everyone in a sense suffers in this world. Not that no one's happy. I'm not saying that, but there's what to have compassion on every person. Then he says that the next level of compassion is on the Jewish people for our whole history and everything that we've gone through that got us to today. So, you get on a bus in Israel and you look around and you see every kind of kippah, every kind of not kippah, every skin color at this point in Israel, every skin color you can imagine, just the full range. And if you I don't know if you've ever sat in a bus and just kind of look around at people and that everyone's got their story. And here we are in Israel, and we're all linked to the same fate and destiny somehow, being here at this time in history. So he said that's another level of compassion, of having compassion on the Jewish people for everything that we've gone through. And then he said there's another level of compassion, of having compassion on the Shekhinah, on God's presence in this world, which is also in exile. And having compassion on God and thinking, as it were, Nebuch, I know this isn't the kind of world that you envisioned. Right? You gave us free will, and you knew the possibilities, but can you imagine when a person has a baby, and they look at the baby and they just see all this potential and they have all these hopes and dreams for them. So can you imagine when God created the world, he wanted a beautiful, fixed, rectified, peaceful world. And look at it. And having compassion, this is a very Hasidic idea, having compassion on the exile of the Shekhinah. So then there's another pasuk in Devarim 13:18. And it says, and God will give you compassion and have compassion upon you. So from this we learn that ultimately having compassion is also a gift from God. Yeah. Thank you. Just like everything else in life is a gift. So even having compassion, because this verse says that God will give you compassion. So a lot of times what it means is that we have to pray to have compassion. We have to pray that God opens our heart so that we can have compassion. Because it's true that everyone's born differently, and some people have a gentler nature. Some people are more judgmental. But in general, most people are judgmental. And it doesn't even, we're not talking about good or bad here. But just we look at the world, we go through life, and on almost a minute-to-minute basis, we have to judge the situation. We have to judge who to trust and who not to trust, and how is this going to work out, and so we're just kind of used to judging situations. So a lot of time we end up judging people and not giving them what Pirkei Avot says is chaf-zchut, the benefit of the doubt, because we get into a routine, and it's almost a survival thing, because we have to protect ourselves. And a lot of times to protect ourselves, we have to look at situations very realistically. But then we forget to, when we look at the not a person's actions, but the core of the person, that there's a difference between their actions and the person themselves. And so sometimes we judge the actions, and then we make the leap and we judge the person. The essence of the person, we also judge them. And we really have to learn to divide those things. So we really need to pray for compassion. It's not something that necessarily comes easy. Maybe for some people. Maybe for some people maybe it's because of 10 previous lifetimes they've worked on it very hard. So when they come into this world, they're already in a compassionate state. Okay, so now let's go back and try to understand this first verse now. And also try to understand what Moshe's question was in the first place. So when it says, and Elohim said to Moshe, I am Yud-Kei Vav-Kei. So this is one of the highest revelations. This is the absolute last thing that we say on Yom Kippur. At the end of Ne'ilah, at the end of the whole month of Elul, of introspection and trying to do tshuva, and the 10 days of tshuva, Rosh Hashanah, and Yom Kippur, the last davening of Yom Kippur, when we yell out Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, one time, and then Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed 3 times, and then Hashem Hu HaElokim 7 times. Hashem Hu HaElokim. But this is the source right here. This is really the source of it saying clearly that Elokim, which we usually relate to din, judgment, severity, law, order, that's Elokim. And none of these things are negative. They're all needed in this world. And Yud-Kei Vav-Kei is called the name of compassion. This is called the name of compassion. And so here, God is saying to Moshe, who's questioning his judgment, like, God, it's worse for them. You've done evil to the people. So God turns around and says, Moshe, like, you have to know that Elokim is Yud-Kei Vav-Kei. It looks like bad to you. It looks like I don't know what I'm doing, right? And that's what he says. Now you'll see what I'll do to Paro. Now you'll see. But the statement translated to our own lives is, it's one of the secrets of sanity in this world. Because, again, we're confronted on a daily level by judgments in the world, whether it's in our own life or we look around at different people, we look at nations, and we just see judgments everywhere. And God is saying here, it's all Yud-Kei Vav-Kei. It's all good, Gamzu L'Tova, and don't get leeway to think that there's two different forces here. It's one. When we say Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. There's the name Elokim also in the Shema. And then we said, no, Hashem is one. It's not like Elokim is one force and Yud-Kei Vav-Kei is another force. And they're even compatible. No, they're one. They're the same thing. The same thing. but you have to have such eyes to see this. That's what we learned a couple of weeks ago. That's why when we say the Shema, we not only close our eyes, but we cover our eyes. Because when we look at the world, it's very hard to understand that these two forces are the same thing. It's very difficult. And yet when we succeed, we're getting to like the essence of what Torah is trying to teach us. Now we're going to go back in a little while and try to understand deeper what Moshe was asking. Remember when we started, we said like, if you just read the translation, you can end up with a very shallow understanding. But before we do that, I already mentioned that Moshe has a second essential quality, and that is selflessness, which is also sometimes called bitul, or bittul hayesh, which means self-nullification of the ego. Now, how do we know this? Because later on in Devarim, the Torah gives witness that Moshe was the most humble person on the face of the earth. So the Torah itself gives witness to this. So then we have a major question, and many of you know that we're doing this leadership seminar on Sunday nights, but this is like a big issue. And it's how do you be a leader and be humble at the same time? Like, how do you put yourself out there and lead, and you're still humble at the same time? For many people, that's like a oxymoron. Like, how, like if you're humble, you're quiet, you're introverted, you don't make waves, you don't put yourself out there. And being a leader is you have to have a pretty big ego. And I don't mean in a bad way, but you have to be able to put yourself out there. So it looks like how can you do both? That's what Moshe was able to do. He became the paradigm of Jewish leadership, including of trying to push leadership away at the burning bush. And there's a whole string of Jewish leaders that God came to them and said, I want you to be the leader. And they wanted to turn it down out of true humbleness. It's like someone else could do it better than me. Not that I won't take the achra, but someone else could do it better than me. Now, can you imagine in like the way politics works in the world now? Like if God came to certain people and said, I want you to be president, right? Of course, I'm a natural. like who else would you want? But Jewish leadership is always like pushing it away, or at least not going after it. It just comes to you. You know, there's so many cases of great rabbis. They never applied for a position, and they never got paid to be a leader. But people just start knocking on the door, and they open it up, and of course they're going to help whoever's there. And so you have so many famous people that they didn't do anything to fill a leadership role. It just came to them just because who they were. And then when they saw the responsibility, they didn't run from it, but they didn't like try to grasp it. So this quality of bitul is connected to chachma. That in the sfirot, The names of the Sfirot that we're familiar with is what's called the outside level. When we talk about Keter, Chachma, Bina, Dat, Chesed, Gevura, Tiferet, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, Malchut, those are the outer dimensions of the Sphira. But then there's what's called an inner motivating force. There's an inner essence that drives the outside level. And these are words that not everyone is familiar with. But the one for Chachma is Bitul. In other words, the inner essence of wisdom is self-nullification. So this is the teaching in Chassidut that wisdom, first of all, wisdom is not an accumulation of facts. Wisdom is like a whole different level. And we're told that one acquires wisdom through making space in their ego, in their being, for divine wisdom to enter. In other words, people who think that they are accumulating wisdom are actually filling up all the space. And that Bitul is very connected to what's called the Ein Sof, the Ayin, nothingness. So wisdom in many cases is connected to meditation and the ability to just become what's called an open channel. And that's what Moshe really was. Moshe reached the level that his will was God's will, like in Pirkei Avot. He was just, God's wisdom could come through him. It wasn't coming from Moshe. Moshe never claimed it was coming from him, and he made it clear that I'm just a channel. So 2 times in the Torah, when the people are complaining against him and Aaron, so he says, V'nachnu ma. And what are we that you're complaining against us? We're just doing God's will. Like, why are you complaining against us? What are we? So if you look at the word Chachma, and you divide the letters, it's Koach Ma. The power of self-nullification. Or like it says in Pirkei Avot, the fence around wisdom is shtika, is silence. Because the silence and the meditation and the prayer and becoming an open channel, that is how wisdom comes to. And that's how inspiration comes to also. Inspiration comes when we open ourselves up for God's energy to enter us. L'chaim, l'chaim. Baruch atah Adonai melech haolam shehakol niyeh b'dvaro. So this class and last class, I'm taking a lot of time explaining Moshe because it's very important. Because as a central character, we want to understand like who he was. So these are the 2 main midot, traits that Moshe had: selflessness and compassion. Now there's a beautiful, it's actually beyond awesome, numerical gematria that is a support for this. So Bitul is 47, equals 47. And Rachamim compassion is 298. When you add them together, it's 345 equals Moshe. Like what else could you want, right? It's like, and so Rav Ginsburg actually explains that since the Mashiach is a manifestation of the soul of Moshe, so he will also have these two qualities. He says, though, that the level of compassion of Mashiach will be even greater than that of Moshe's. Be even greater than Moshe. And you can see it because in the three levels of compassion that we discussed, really having compassion on every person, Am Yisrael, and the Shekhinah. So we see that Mashiach will express all of these, because as great as Moshe was, and he led us out of Egypt, and he brought down the Torah, but he wasn't able to spread it to the whole world. I mean, it has actually spread to the whole world, but the full job description of the Mashiach is he will first come for Am Yisrael. In other words, he has to take care of business at home first, but then the Mashiach will become the teacher of all of humanity. But he's acting from compassion, from this basic compassion on every soul that comes down into a body. And the Shekhinah being in exile. Because once Am Yisrael is redeemed, it's not a full redemption until the whole world is redeemed. So that means the Shekhinah also isn't fully redeemed. Because God created all of humanity in the image of God. So the Mashiach has to finish the whole job description, and it's coming from a deep, deep, deep sense of compassion. And of course, that will give the Mashiach incredible inspiration, in which he will be able to inspire the whole world. How else is the world going to listen to him? Unless they see something in his teachings that inspire them. And they'll be able to say, this is for real. I can accept this. This is true. Because if a person can't say those things, they can't accept whatever is being offered. But from the side of Mashiach, it's coming from the sense of compassion. Now, what's a very deep thing here is the root of rachamim is rachem. The three letters rachem. Rachem equals 248 equals Avraham. This is like even a earlier source. I mean, if you remember, I've mentioned a couple of times my theory. I don't think it's a theory, I think it's fact, but that in all of human history, that Avraham is the most influential person. When Mashiach comes, so then maybe he'll take over. But here we see a beautiful thing here, that the compassion of Mashiach, the compassion of Moshe, is first found in its root, rachem, in Avram. Because why did he spend his whole... He was trying to turn everyone on to the idea of one God. Because he felt compassion on people who didn't understand this. Now, again, that was his basic motivating force. And he felt bad that God had created a world and it just wasn't turning out the way it was, the way it could. Okay, so with the few minutes left, now let's go back and try to understand Moshe's question here. Why have you done evil to the people? And why did you send me? And remember, we said that if you look at it in the most simple way, it can't be just what it's saying, because God had already told him how this was going to unfold. And that Paro would not listen to him, and that he would bring miracles and wonders, and then God would be able to take them out. So this is, again, another Torah from Rav Ginsburg. And I'll never forget when he taught this. It penetrated to my core when he said this. He said, Moshe understood very well the game plan here. He understood the game plan. He understood that darkness comes before light. That no pain, no gain. He understood, in essence, that Elohim is Yud-Kei Vav-Kei. He understood that we have to make what's called our hishtadlut. We have to do our effort. He understood that nothing comes on golden platters in this world. He understood all of that. So the question is, so what is he asking here? So Rav Ginsburg said a very simple thing. But like I said, when I heard it, it just what Moshe was saying was, Rabbona Sha'olam, I understand that. But you're God, and you could make the world any way you want. I understand this, the rules of the game, they make sense and they work. But you could change the rules. Reality could be different. So why don't you do it? When I heard this, it was it just hit so deep, because first of all, we have to understand, to get to the level of all those things that I said, that Moshe understood this and he understood, we work our whole lifetime to try to understand, because these are the rules of the game. God made the world in a way that he wants the best for us, but in order to do that, we have to work very, very hard to attain and to understand, and the daily battle between the Yetzirah Tov and the Yetzirah Hara. God set it up like that. But Moshe was asking one step before the whole thing. It was okay, we have to play by the rules, but you could change the rules. It could be different. So Rav Ginsburg said, there's no answer for that. There's no... Right now, until Mashiach comes, right, and maybe explains it a little bit better. But there's no answer, but the question is an important question. If we get too hung up in the question, though, it becomes very self-defeating and negative, because then we say, we get bitter, and you could make it differently, and why do I have to work, and why was I born this way, and I could have been born that way, and why am I poor, and why am I sick, and why is that person poor, why is that person... Then we start to question the whole thing, but that's not the intent here. The intent here is the typical Jewish idea is there's nothing better than a good question. I heard from Reb Shlomo that his teacher was Reb Shlomo Hyman. And like he was supposedly this brilliant beyond brilliant beyond brilliant. And sometimes in class, a student would ask like a really good question. And, you know, most of the time he would give answers, but sometimes he wouldn't give an answer. And then someone asked, like, why didn't you give an answer to this? He said, well, the truth is I could have come up with 10 answers. But why ruin such a great question with not as great an answer? So he wouldn't answer. He said, like, what a great question, right? Just, that's it. Just leave it. It just, when we get to Pesach, it's all about questions. And, you know, for people who have studied in yeshiva, you know, like, to ask that great question, in a sense, is like much better than coming up with a great answer. It's just like, because you have to really, like, stretch yourself to question. And this is again what the Ishbitzer is saying. God didn't want to discourage Moshe from questioning. He started off a little strong, but let's say after the golden calf, when God came to Moshe and said, please step out of the way, and I will destroy the people and make a new one from you. And Moshe would say, oh, okay. That's the rules of the game. You set up the rules, and who am I to question? But Rashi explains the language is, please move out of my way. So Rashi says that Moshe understood that God saying, please move out of the way means, oh, if I don't move out of the way, then he can't do it. So I won't move out of the way. And Rashi said that's exactly what God was hinting to him. So he didn't want to discourage him from asking. So even the question, Rabboni Shalom, you could make it different, even though we don't expect an answer to that. Because in a sense, we need to learn to play by the rules of the game. Because if you play by the rules of the game, then you could enter into a place of bittul, and God's wisdom can enter into you. Because if you're always fighting, God, why did you do this and why did you do that? You're never going to open yourself up to understanding. But this question that Moshe asked, he was asking from the greatest level of compassion on the human predicament. And he was like saying, and why did you send me? Rabboni Shalom, why did my soul have to come down into a body? There's 100 answers to that question for each person, 100. And they're all right, and that's what we have to concentrate on. But there is a worth in asking that existential question also, because in the deepest level, God wants us to. Because if not, the world will just, unless, because see, when Mashiach comes, the rules are going to change. That's what we're told. Even the Rambam, who had a very, very rationalist view of Mashiach, not a mystical, but very rational. But if you look at the words of the Rambam, he says after Mashiach comes, there'll no longer be jealousy, there'll no longer be competition, there won't be hunger, there'll be universal love and respect. So you say, wait a minute, those aren't the rules of human nature that I know right now. So if you look carefully at the Rambam also understood it's going to be a game changer. So it's the same thing with, like, we could say, Rabboni Shalom, I understand why Mashiach hasn't come yet. But Rabboni Shalom, like, we need it so badly. Like, couldn't you, like, help us out a little bit? Because if left to our own devices, it could be another, trillion years. We need some, like, help here. Have compassion on us. So that's the worth of Moshe's question, right? Again, he's not rebelling against God, and he's not really even questioning the parameters that we live in. But he's asking the big question because someone has to ask that for there to be a game changer. And like I said, when Mashiach comes, things will change. The parameters of the human condition will change. Even though it's hard for us to understand that and imagine that. Because we look at a world, and can you imagine a world with no jealousy? No hatred? No war? It seems that that's been an intrinsic part of human nature. So we are looking at a different worldview here. So we'll end with a bracha that, like we said, compassion is a gift. And we should simply have the wisdom and the strength to pray that God gives us compassion for others, and that also that he has compassion on the world and helps us a bit and helps bring the final redemption.